guys, welcome to episode 98 of Access on Trial. It's been quite a while, I think about 2 months or so since the last episode. Probably the longest break that we've had to take from the show. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I guess, yeah, I'll start there. I want to apologize to everybody listening for the extended break. There's just been a lot going on, both for me and for Mike. I know that he's dealing with school and trying to adjust to his work schedule and a bunch of other things. And mostly I've been trying to focus on my thesis, and I've been dealing with a lot of things in my personal life that's um, definitely been draining, and I had to focus on uh, on those things to kind of get my life in order and focus on school and for a while. So it's been hard to find the energy. Right now I'm in the process of rearranging my room a little bit. So the setup is not usually what it is. So I'm doing it from my bed at the moment. But it should be back to normal going forward. So I don't know if you first of all, can you guys hear me okay? Let me know in the chat if the sound and everything is all right. It's been a while since I've done this. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. But I don't know if you guys remember a while back we had it was a physicist, Michael Strauss. I think he was a physicist on the show to talk about intelligent design and to talk about the evidence for God and to talk about fine tuning and all those things. And he came on with us and talked with Mike and I. And I was hoping to get him back on because he had said certain things about physics that were in opposition to other guests that I've had on. And I was looking forward to having a round two with him and also seeing that conversation play out between the physicists. And unfortunately, he said that we had an email exchange, and Amber, let me know if you can hear me okay. Big hugs to you. But yeah, he basically sent me an email saying that he was not really interested in coming back on, and I'll read you guys the email. I asked him for permission if I could read the conversation and address it on the channel. So this is what he said to me. He says, "I'm not sure it would be profitable to continue our discussion since I don't think that there is anything that would change your mind regarding the existence of God. You say that you are open to such an idea, but my observations would indicate otherwise. The point of me discussing whether or not the universe had an origin, aside from the scientific question, would be to make the case that the origin of the universe gives evidence for a transcendent cause such as God. We know science doesn't prove anything, just disproves things. So the best I could do is show that all the known scientific observations and confirmed theories give evidence for an origin of the universe. I could never prove it. If I did show that the known observations and theories give evidence for a beginning, would you agree then that the real origin is likely? And if so, would you agree that this gives evidence for a transcendent cause? And if so, would you agree that that cause could be God?" So I want to address the first thing he says, which is that he doesn't think that there's anything that could change my mind. This is just not true. He's just under a misconception there. I could have my mind changed if I was provided credible evidence. He failed to do this because his approach to me was one non sequitur after the next, and none of the things he tried to use as evidence even remotely supported the metaphysics that he's trying to defend. Yasmin writes, "Take more drugs. We're all gonna die, so stay sober and pray ramen under influence." Yeah, I've never been a drug taker or a drinker in my life. Yeah, I never really been someone under the influence. But yeah. So I guess the first thing I want to say is But yes, he's wrong about me as far as me being capable of changing my mind. It's just that his arguments, I think, were very weak. Um, and so, even if the universe could have been shown to have a beginning, there is no reason to make the jump that this would have to be a transcendent cause. I never asked him for proof, by the way. He says, we all know science doesn't prove anything. Sure, I never asked him for proof. And if you guys go back to the episode that he was on, all we asked him for was credible evidence. Um, there's no reason to assume that even if the universe had a beginning, which I think is quite an open question, that this would bring credence to the idea that this beginning had to be something transcendent. Um, so it couldn't. The cause could be God, and I never said that God was or a certain concept of God was an impossibility. And there are some definitions that would be, but not as a whole. But I'm not interested in what we could imagine to be the case. There's obviously a difference between the imaginary, the potential, the probable, and the actual. And he could never get off the ground as far as showing that his beliefs were anything but imaginary. Even when he said certain things that may be true scientifically, and we'll get to the fine tuning observations in a minute. But those things never lead to where he wanted them to lead to. He always had to make other jumps and extra steps and non sequiturs to get to his position. So going forward in the email, he tells me that I should read a book called A Fortunate Universe by Luke Barnes and Geraint Lewis. He says there is no debate for those who have studied this in detail. Luke is a Christian and Geraint, I don't know how to pronounce the name, is an atheist, and they both are astrophysicists. They both agree that the universal constants are tuned for life. Luke believes that he's a designer, and Gerard believes we are all in a lucky universe in the multiverse. So my opposition was never against the idea that the obvious that it's the constants aren't such that, or it's because the constants are what they are, that the kind of life that we see came about the way that it came about. Obviously, that's the case, especially from a physicalist perspective. If you think that everything is physical, then yeah, that's going to be the explanation. That the laws are what they are, and the laws gave rise to life as well as everything else. That's not the issue here. One is to say that we couldn't have had any life without a certain kind of tuning. Someone like Sean Carroll would disagree with this. He says, well, it would be a different kind of universe, it would be a different kind of life, but there's no reason to assume that there wouldn't be any kind of life. But let's say that there wouldn't be any kind of life. There are other aspects of the tuning that the constants that we observe in the universe that have nothing to do with life, that are just set up in such a way, and I use them metaphorically, that it makes the universe be a certain kind of universe. And by definition, if you were to change those constants, then the universe would be a different universe. There's nothing about this that metaphysically provides good reason to think that this must have been set to be like that. Especially when in most places in the universe is not fit for life. The life that does exist has all kinds of problems, and which of course someone like him would pin to nonsense like original sin, as opposed to just the actually observable reality that this so-called design is and tuned life is actually quite poor. But yes, none of this supports the metaphysics that he wants. He says that I'm not correct about what I've said about fine tuning. He says the range of constants for life is narrow compared to the parameter space. He seems to think that I'm like denying the idea that the constants are tuned a certain way, like are a certain way. I wasn't doing that. When Mike was on the show and he gave him the example about probability and how theists play with the odds, they play with the mathematics. They try to make it seem like the room for difference as far as the constants is far narrower than what it actually is. And you guys can go back to some of the prior episodes we've had, both with Dr. David and some other physicists about the idea of fine tuning. It's actually the range is far greater than religious people want to admit. The range of how different the constants could have been. So that's the other point that he never addressed on the show, even when Mike brought it up to him, and he gave the example of Michael Jordan, or I think it was Michael Jordan. I forget exactly the example at the moment, but so he says that because of how I view fine tuning, that this means that I'm not open to theism, which is weird to me because I stated on record that fine tuning is the best argument that theists have ever come up with. He says, you will not accept any non-natural explanation, no matter what the evidence. First of all, how can you provide evidence for something non-natural? By definition, there is a problem there. Yes, I have no reason with and I brought this up, which again he didn't really address on the show. The record for naturalistic explanations doing away with supernatural ones is very clear. Why would I prefer a supernatural explanation to a naturalistic explanation? What reason would I have to make that move? So he says, well, how is that open? If you can, again, if he could have provided not just God the gaps, which is what he was doing, he says, well, we don't have all the answers, or science is unclear about some of this, therefore it must be God, which is what theists have always done throughout history, until science eventually provides the real answers. I've no reason to accept a supernatural explanation. He says, what evidence could have been gathered 2,000 years ago and passed on to use would be sufficient to make a case that Jesus rose from the dead? If the answer is none, then you are not even open to the necessary foundation of Christianity. Christianity is falsifiable. Just show Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Find his bones, for instance. And this is absurd. How could you? Christianity is not falsifiable. There's no grounds. There's no way to find his bones. That doesn't mean that he rose from the dead. Again, he's choosing explanations of things we observe actually have taken place in the world and in reality. He's doing away with those and saying that it's more likely that somebody resurrected, and that I should just accept this, and that if I don't accept it, then I'm closed-minded. There's nothing falsifiable about the things he's saying, and certainly not finding bones or a body doesn't make a resurrection more likely. He asked me what kind of evidence could have been gathered 2,000 years ago. But this is the problem, is that you're trying to use history that doesn't deal in the supernatural, by definition, to support supernatural claims. You try to use science, which deals in the empirical, and not just the empirical, but certainly in a degree to which he was not engaging with the material on, to support a metaphysical idea that he cannot ground. When it was pointed out the flaws of the design, when it was pointed out the fact that why would a god even need physical components or physical constraints to have the world be what he wanted it to be? He didn't reply to that. When we pointed out to the failure of this design, he blamed original sin. It was all a perfect kind of, how would I phrase it? Kind of barrier of dogmatism, where any sort of thing you could show him that is clearly against his narrative, he has another claim that he can't justify or provide concrete evidence for to just continue the story. So, he says he disagrees with the idea that theism doesn't have a good track record of explanation. But he's disagreeing with reality. Theism has always claimed to have answers that then science came about and did away with. Many things that the Bible claims, science has disproven, depending on which interpretations you take. There's nothing that we had a physicalist explanation for at one point that now we've abandoned for supernatural explanation. And to this, he says, I disagree wholeheartedly with the statement. Show me one claim of Christianity that has been disproven by science. Yet Judeo-Christian writings did predict that the universe had an origin. Again, this statement shows you're not open to theism at all. Regardless of the evidence, you will pick a naturalistic explanation, no matter how improbable or contrived. In addition, the Bible claims that God's character is primarily seen in nature, through the workings of nature, not through miracles. So according to Christian beliefs, even naturalistic mechanisms could show evidence for God, and I believe they do in the remarkable workings and in their design. So he wholeheartedly disagrees with reality. That I never said that. So let me. How do I want to phrase this? Again, it disproved Christianity depending on which version and which interpretation of Christianity you take. If you take, for example, the idea that mental illness is the result of demons, then yeah, that's nonsense, and science has shown that to be nonsense. If you take it that the origin of Earth is 6,000 years old, or that evolution isn't real, and that we came through that Adam and Eve. If you take Adam and Eve to not be metaphorical, but to be literal, then science has disproven all of these statements. I didn't realize I have to plug in my computer real quick. Give me 1 second here. Just a minute. Hope you guys can still hear me. Forgot to plug in. Okay, that's better. All right. Sorry about that, guys. So, now the okay, here we go. Even if the universe has an origin, there's no reason to assume that the origin has to be God. The statements in the Bible. Oh, thank you, Yasmin. We like you too. Thank you for joining us tonight. I always appreciate when you guys come in and support what we're doing. So yeah, he says, regardless of the evidence, you will pick a naturalistic explanation, no matter how improbable or contrived. This is the severe cognitive dissonance of religious people. You can't talk about probability when it comes to supernatural claims. You have no grounds to show, to even, any improbable naturalistic explanation is more probable than a supernatural one, because you can't even get off the ground to show that your supernatural claims aren't imaginary. So it's insane to me that he thinks that his explanations are more likely, despite the fact that he can't provide any concrete evidence at all. And when he says that the Bible says his character can be seen through nature, again, this is just confirmation bias. you haven't shown anything about his character. These are stories that you're projecting onto reality to fit the narrative that you want to be true. And there's nothing remarkable about the design that he's talking about. Cancer in children, organs and systems in the body that again, and look at things like Richard Dawkins has written about this, right? There are aspects of what we are that could clearly have been designed better. In terms of the fine tuning, the fact that most species have died out. The universe is mostly too hot or too cold to actually have life. This is not evidence of a good designer. So he says that I recognize design in everything except nature. Why? Because I don't want to. The atheistic scientists recognize apparent design. At least they are honest enough to admit that they at least look designed. And this is an example of what he didn't answer that Mike asked him when he was on the show. How would he go about discerning the difference between something designed and non-designed? Well, we see that we can say it's designed. We can say it's designed because we have an empirical basis of actually seeing the thing being designed, not assuming that it is. So with a painting, we have seen painters paint and make a painting. And another thing that he didn't answer when I gave him the watchmaker fallacy: complexity doesn't assume design, doesn't assume intelligence, any more than, and this is the fallacy that's given. If you have a clock, so the universe is complex. Well, let me actually look at the exact fallacy here, because I don't want to get it wrong. It's called the watchmaker fallacy. It's a theological argument. It states that because there is a design, there must be a designer. The fact that he still uses this argument when it's been debunked for so long now is just mind-boggling to me. And here's the problems with this argument. Complexity does not necessarily require a designer. It can come from mindless natural processes. Hume gives the example of a snowflake and the generation of crystals. The watch is a bad analogy. The watchmaker is more complex than the watch. If complexity proves intelligent design, then the question arises of who designed such a complex watchmaker. In addition, we can say that a watch was created in, let's say, a random number, in 1777, and a watch is complex. Doesn't mean that for every similarity of attributes, the same thing must be true about the universe. Like the universe could be complex and is complex. It obviously doesn't mean that it was created in 1777. Just because the watch itself was designed and its complexity is due to it being designed, doesn't mean that the complexity has to arise in the same way. Organic matter and artificial things are not the same. And he's assuming that they are. So there's nothing inconsistent about what I'm saying. I'm recognizing that we can say things are designed when we actually have an empirical basis to make the judgment, and reject that kind of metaphysics where we don't have a support for it. Now he claims that there are mathematical theories from which we can infer design. Therefore, it is not incredulity. I'm yet to see what he doesn't actually add anything to that. He just states it. There is no mathematics that you can apply to the metaphysics of design or of creation. These are he's just mixing things that don't belong at all together. Um, so um, he says, I am saying a few things. First, I am saying that your definition of good and bad design is based on an incomplete view. Any designer makes trade-offs in design, computer code, etc. So now he's claiming that God is limited in some way, um, based on the required goals and function. Why would you expect a different in nature's design? So he's saying that he's trading off. He's basically making it so it's possible for kids to get cancer. Like, doesn't make any sense. And how do you know the ultimate goals and functions of the designer of nature? So again, every time that there is something that goes against his narrative, he says, well, you're not God. You don't know any better. Who are you to question God? This is pure dogmatism. This is completely unfalsifiable claims and a viewpoint that he can't justify. And that his only answer is, well, how would you know? You weren't there. It's like, okay, how do you know that that's actually what took place in the first place? He says, second, I am saying that there are many bad things in the world because of human action and human choices, which is partially due to human sin in a fallen world, which again, God has allowed and set up the scenario for in which this reality of sin is actually a reality. Um, he's when we challenged him on God's freedom, again, he evaded almost every question that was asked of him. If you say that God is free, so not constrained uh, by something prior to him, but that God only ever chooses the good, then there's no contradiction between having free will and yet your choices only being a variety of good choices. It doesn't mean that you have to choose a bad choice. So you don't. God is not off the hook just by saying there is sin in a fallen world, and somehow sin translates into kids having cancer. Like, it's lunacy. He says, why do you keep mentioning religion? I'm not talking about religion in general. I'm talking about the claims of Christianity. The Christian worldview answers more questions about the reality of the world we see in a consistent, cohesive way more than any other worldview. Again, this is pure delusion. Christianity answers nothing. Christianity makes up answers. Christianity ignores the problem of evil or excuses it as, who are we to judge God? We don't know any better, which that is not sufficient for anybody that actually has any kind of empathy. Christianity provides no reason to assume that its supernatural claims and metaphysical claims are anything but imaginary. It just states things like every other religion. He thinks that Christianity is special, which is all the same things that every person of every other religion will say. That Islam is special, that Hinduism is special. Instead, they're all doing the same shit. Um, all he's doing is God of the gaps, but he's pretending. And when I brought that up, um, when I brought it up, he said that it's not God of the gaps, that I'm doing naturalism of the gaps. And for him to be a scientist to say that is shocking to me. I'm not doing naturalism of the gaps. I'm looking at reality. I'm looking at the record. I'm looking at what explanations, what even is an explanation. What he has are stories. They're not explanations. They're stories and narratives that are formed in such a way and constructed in such a way that they are immune to evidence. They are immune to observations. And again, like I was saying before, it's not naturalism of the gaps. It's looking at the fact that science has dwindled away at the power of religion, has shown the failings and the misconceptions of religion, and has only grown and helped us in our understanding of what reality seems to actually be like. Christianity makes up answers, and at best now the most they can do is try to reinterpret these ancient texts to vaguely fit a 21st century view of science, and to try to hijack science to support metaphysical ideas that the science itself does not support. I have no problem with the idea that the universe is metaphorically tuned in such a way that if it was different, maybe there wouldn't be life. Maybe there wouldn't be the universe as there is. Who cares? It's Hey, Steve. Good to see you. How are you? Um, so again, the fine tuning is, I can acknowledge as an observation that the constants are what they are, and that if we change them, the universe will be different. There is no connection between that observation and the enormous metaphysical jump that he wants to take to say that therefore it's more likely that this was set in place on purpose by some metaphysical deity that exists in some other realm, but somehow still needs physical restraints and constraints to make a universe. Why would that even be the case? Why would there be this distinction between spirit and physical? By the way, he never answered the mind body problem either, which I brought up. It's like, how do you actually, if these two things are different, how do they interact with one another? How can something non-physical interact with something physical if they are different substances? Completely, it was never addressed. Lastly, he says, and this I do appreciate. He says, "It was a pleasure being part of your show, and I'm happy to continue the conversation. If I'm ever convinced that you're actually open to Christianity, I would be happy to return to your show. One final question: if I were to show you beyond a reasonable doubt that Jesus did rise from the dead, would you become a follower of him?" No, I wouldn't, because I don't see the connection between a resurrection and the truth of anybody's metaphysics. I mean, and again, this is the cognitive dissonance of these people. Would he be willing to say the same thing, that if somehow it could be shown beyond a reasonable doubt that Muhammad performed miracles, or that Sadhu Sai Baba resurrected, or that any of the other resurrection stories were also true, would he accept these other religions as truth? He wouldn't. Even if a resurrection was somehow a possible phenomenon in the universe, that doesn't mean that the metaphysics of Christianity would therefore be true, or that the lessons that Jesus taught were the right ones. I would be much more likely to be interested in Christianity and consider it to be a more reasonable perspective if resurrections were shown to be a possible phenomenon. It would certainly bring me closer to viewing it as a potentially sensible thing. But would I just blindly decide, oh, Christianity is true, I'm a follower of Christ now? No, I wouldn't, because I would have much more questions to ask. So it's unfortunate that he won't come on, but again, he's projecting his own dogmatism onto me. I asked him for evidence. All he had was jumps in logic, leaps and conclusions not justified by the observations, even with the observations that we agreed on, like the constants in the universe. Why that should lead him to think that these constants have to be set up by something else, something that should also itself be complex to be so powerful, and yet would somehow be function outside of the restraints that he thinks have to be there for nature. So yeah, that essentially was the dialogue there between us. And again, I'm on record saying that I think the fine-tuning argument is the best argument that there is for theism, and it still doesn't lead you anywhere. you still have all your work ahead of you to actually justify the metaphysics that they want to pretend that now science justifies. It doesn't. And there's nothing more probable about supernatural explanations than there are about naturalistic ones. So let's see. I'm trying to read the comments here. Yasmin writes, make more clear, I'm trans and bi. I listen to UG black metal from a very young age, about 2 decades. I always got along better with weird people and thinkers. Well, we welcome people here of all genders and identities and sexual orientations. All that matters, of course, is that there is consent among adults. Nobody is being hurt in any kind of way. And as long as that's the case, everybody's welcome. Steve writes, fine-tuning falls way short, presup short. I think presuppositionalism is the worst, like the bottom of the barrel types of apologetics. But I think fine-tuning is the best they have, and it still doesn't get you anywhere. So, obviously I'm hoping that now we can get back to doing a more consistent show. Like I said, there's been a lot been going on for both Mike and I. And honestly, I just have not had the energy to put in this and also put in many other things in my own life. But I definitely miss doing this with you guys and interacting with everybody, and I love doing the show. And so, I'm definitely not going anywhere. Like, even when we do take breaks from time to time, we always will come back and and provide more content. Hopefully, it can be on a more consistent basis. I think that I might try, if I'm able to do another show tomorrow. And I'm thinking of doing a show on language and different views about language and how it functions as a tool to understand reality and its limitations. So that may be a topic. Mike and I were talking about some other topics, like well, there's also some guests that I've reached out to, and we're just waiting to hear back from them. That might potentially be good episodes. Steve, yeah, I definitely agree. It's a white barrel, and they're all at the bottom. Yeah, that's a good analogy. But yeah, this was going to be a shorter show. I just wanted to kind of go over this email exchange. Do you guys have any questions for me? Anything you want me to address or ask? If not, I'm probably gonna end the stream short. This was just a quick, just dipping my toes back in the water to get back into some kind of schedule. But I hope that the email exchange was clear to you guys, and my explanations and responses was clear to you guys. But yeah, just let me know in the comments if there's anything that you'd like me to answer. But if not, I appreciate everybody's support. As always, just like and subscribe. Axioms on Trial on YouTube and patreon.com/Axioms on Trial as well. Yes, Steve, it's always good to see you as well. We should definitely catch up sometime soon. You're always a fun person to talk to, and I hope all is well with you and everything. And good night, Amber. It was really, really good to see you again as well. No problem, Yasmin. You seem to communicate great to us. Yeah, I don't see any problems there. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for joining me on this very quick little live here. I will be back definitely sooner than than later. I know it was a couple of months off here, but I'll be back making more regular content. So I hope everybody has a wonderful night, and I'll see you guys again very soon.